If you've ever wondered why your first instinct is to armor up whenever conflict arises in a relationship, this is Mal. Mal is a friend of mine. She's not a client. She's a friend. She was a supportive friend when I was doing the live lesson plans, and she was just supporting me as a friend. And suddenly she realized some things in her own personal life, and she accidentally started practicing what we were talking about in the lives, in the lesson plans. We're going to do a deep dive into how we, both of us, have learned that our past has wired our reactions and how we're rewiring them for real connection now. So our childhood experiences really do shape our communication style in our adult life, guys. So, for example, I had a brother who unexpectedly passed away just a couple weeks before I was born. So I was born into a family with two very emotionally unavailable parents, not because they were bad parents, but because they were trying to grieve the loss of their first child. Um, bef- as they were trying to raise me at the same time, and that deeply affected who I became as an adult. Attachment styles are a struggle for me because of this, not because they did anything wrong, but because they did the best they could, and my little brain learned how to cope with emotionally unavailable parents, and that perpetuated some unhealthy relationship styles in my adult life. So, we're going to also talk about, just to give you an overview of what it is that I'm talking about, we're going to go into how Mal has also noticed some patterns in her life. So, my first question for you, Mal, is what's something from your childhood that you've come to realize plays a role in your tendency to become reactive and defensive when conflict arises now?
So that for me, without getting too much like, oh, it's always on my parents, but definitely my mom. Definitely my mom. She, I know for me and for my sisters as well, my mom, being a child herself, she came from always having to people please. She wanted to make people happy. That's what she did. And she tried to instill that in myself and my sisters. And for a time it worked for a really long time. That's what we wanted to do. Like we knew, hey, if you make people happy, things are great, things are awesome. Everything is all right in the world. But in doing that, you start to shrink yourself, right? You start not to know who you are. And when things are rocking the boat, so to speak, it made me become like reactive. So if my emotions weren't, when my emotions were becoming a problem, or when I reacted a certain way, I got shut down. That made me start to question things. I became defensive, but then the conflict arose. And I became a problem. And it wasn't until a lot later I was like, this isn't right. This isn't right. My mom and I have not had a great relationship for as long as I can remember. And it hasn't been until honestly recently. Um, I wonder why. But I still have a relationship with her, but I don't like using the word control, but it's because I put certain things in place to maintain that relationship. Otherwise, it would just be completely railroaded because she would take all of those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So when you were a child, what were some of the things that she did that would trigger you?
oh,
Or were you even
how
reacting to
much time
them?
do we have? um, so she was big on control. She was big on control. Um, I had to be super girly. I was not allowed to go over to my friend's house. I always had to stay in the house. If I rode my bike, it was only, from this house to this house. She always forced me to go places with her because she doesn't like to be alone. So I was, her little sidekick, all those kinds of things. It wasn't because she actually wanted to spend time with me. It was because she didn't like to be alone.
Mhm.
She just still to this day, she does not like to do anything by herself.
At what point did
Um,
you realize that you were more of a security human than like an emotional support human than a child?
I honestly think I was about 12. I was about 12. And I just started, realizing, looking at my friends and their relationships that they had with their moms, and their parents, and, just other situations, other circumstances. And I was just like, they would be able to actually open up and have conversations and talk with their parents and things like that. And I never had that.
Mm.
I never had that. I was never fortunate enough to go to my mom and say, I'm having a really bad day, or this happened, and, I need you, or, can you talk? And she would turn it. She would, if I said anything, and this isn't just me, my sisters had went through this as well, but she would make it about her. She still makes it about her. It's a competition. It's a competition. And things like that, when you're growing up, or, you have relationships or friendships or anything like that, it's not about competition. It's just about human connection.
Right.
It's about being genuine and loving somebody and caring about somebody. It's never about, ever about competition. Well, suck it up or
Right.
get over it because I had it worse. It's should never be about that.
As an adult, what have you started to realize about the dynamic? Like, first of all, when did you start becoming explosive? In the beginning, you said you had to shrink, but at some point you started putting up your defenses and it started becoming the opposite.
So I've always been a little bit of a sass pack,
Mhm.
but truthfully, I mean, my dad wasn't really around a lot. He has his own demons. He had an
Right.
awful childhood, struggling with addiction and things like that. Um, but even when he wasn't around a ton, he instilled a lot on my sisters and myself. We were very self-sufficient. We were very independent. We were fortunate enough not to rely on other people. So we didn't pick up those traits from our mom. If something needed to get done, we did it ourselves. However, when he wasn't around, um, my mom, like, she there was an incident that occurred with me, and I still remember this. I'm the youngest. My sisters are 10 and 11 years older than me. So when I was in elementary school, they were in high school. There was an incident that took place when I was in middle school, and it was with somebody that my mom hired. And him and his mom would come over to the house all the time. They would clean our house. I think it was once a week or every 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And they worked for us like for years. But as I started developing, he started paying closer attention. And he was older, he was in his 20s. It made me extremely uncomfortable. And he started, trying to make passes, or, do certain types of touches, and I was not okay with it. And I told him to stop. And one day I came home, and he was in like one of my drawers, in my dresser drawers, looking at things and touching things. And I told him, you need to get out of my room. This is not okay. And that's when he like held up a piece of my clothing, and he was like, well, I think you're, about this cup size. He's like, come here, like, let me put it on for you. And
Wow.
I knew, like, because other things had transpired, in my life prior to that, I was like, I know what you're going to do. That's when that internal like gut feeling. I mean, obviously there were verbal things that he was
Right.
inquiring, but I said, you're going to try and do something to me, and this is not okay. And all my red flags popped up, started kind of going haywire. I didn't know what to do. I knew my mom wasn't a safe space because of how she made me feel previously.
Mhm.
I talked to my friends at school, and they said, "No, you need to talk to your mom."
Mhm.
I think I was honestly more
Thinking she
afraid
would
of
be the
my
protector.
mom. I would think, I was honestly more afraid to tell my mom because I was afraid she was going to blame me.
Right.
But I did. I went to her, I talked to her, I broke down crying. She said, "I'll take care of it." But she was honestly, I think, one of my first forms of betrayal that I had ever encountered. I didn't see him or his mom for maybe like a month. And that made me feel good. That made me feel reassured. And we got out of school early one day, and I walked home from school, and I came home, and he was back at the house, not his mom, but he was back at the house. And she never had a conversation with me about it. She never told me, never anything. And so me coming home at, 12 years old, 13 years old, my own daughter's age that I have now almost,
Right.
and walking in that house and then just seeing his face, that terrified me. Having that happen to me, that's when I started acting out.
Okay.
Because what that's circling back, sorry, but that's when I started acting out and I started getting angry and aggressive because
Do you think
I
it was
knew I
because that was the message right in that incident? Your mom, that the message was she's not going to protect me. I have to protect myself.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I found out, because, he was there. He didn't just show up. She had kept them the entire time. She didn't protect me. She didn't promise to do what she told me that she was going to do. And so I knew at that moment, I have to protect myself.
Right.
Nobody else is going to do it. The people who brought me into this world, who are supposed to love you, protect you, and, shield you from anything bad, which had already happened, they didn't know that was my fault because I felt like I couldn't come to them. Well, let me rephrase that. It wasn't my fault,
Mhm.
but they were not aware of what had already transpired. But I finally spoke up. I finally said something, and she didn't. She just, "Oh, okay, well, we'll let you keep working here, but she can't know. We're gonna brush it under the rug. Just keep it hush hush."
Right.
And so that's when that's when I just went full out. Like, okay,
So this is definitely an example. This is a huge event that happened in your life, obviously, but there are for some people there are smaller events that are going to happen. But what happens is in our mind, that triggered you. That was the moment where you were like, I'm going to have to take care of myself because nobody's doing it for me. And that has translated throughout your life into in the moments where you feel unsafe, you get bigger instead of smaller because okay, obviously I'm the only one that can handle this, so let me handle it. And how in your current life, fast forward, that was a huge incident but a small fraction of your childhood that developed into characteristics throughout your life that have caused unhealthy connections, I would say. Would you agree?
yeah.
And at what point did you first notice that you might be contributing to some of the recurring problems in your relationships as a result of your reaction to what happened as a child? And learn that you might be able to make changes that could improve your current relationships, your adult relationships.
So as I got older, because like once I started reacting and becoming essentially like vicious,
Mhm.
verbally, physically, I was getting into fights, I was looking to pick fights, really anything and everything. Once I started dating people, they were all very toxic. They were all very toxic. They were all very, violent people. I was looking for like the biggest and the baddest because I knew if something were to happen to me, they would be able to protect me.
Mhm.
But also if something like were to happen to them, I was going to be able to have their back.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But also I was also looking for I was also searching for relationships that weren't I knew what they were capable of because I also knew what I was capable of, but I
Right.
also knew that they weren't going to last. Because if they didn't last, then, you know, they weren't going to be able to hurt me.
I think that a lot of times, people with these kinds of attachment issues, myself included, we learn that people are going to let us down. So subconsciously,
Right.
we're picking people that we know are going to disappoint us because then we won't be surprised when they fumble.
Right.
So that translated, but eventually you have had a handful of sustainable relationships throughout your life, like people who proved you wrong over and over again and continue to show up. Am I correct?
Yeah, I have had a few very like good, healthy relationships. I have.
And how have you
The
been
first
able
one terrified me.
how have you been able to sustain those relationships in spite of your instinct to want to retreat?
Growth, personal growth, recognize. So I personally I recognize patterns. That's something that I've been able to do since I was a kid. I
Mhm.
see patterns with people, with myself. Um, Like if something happens once, okay. If it's twice, maybe that's a coincidence. But if it if it happens more than twice, those are choices. Those are patterns that people do consistently. You know what
Right.
I mean? So I recognize patterns. I see them constantly. And that's not to say that they cannot be broken, but you have to be willing to put in the work and the effort and want to change it like for yourself. Um, so for me, there came a day when I realized like, yeah, I have some really bad red flags. Like I have problems I need to work on. One of my first relationships I was in, I was at a very young age and we were just toxic AF for
Hmm.
one another. And I was not good for him and he was not good for me. And I started developing a really bad drinking problem. And
Hmm.
I just finally one day I was like, you know what? Like, I can't do this anymore. And I stopped drinking cold turkey for
Hmm.
an entire year because I know that about myself. Like, I do have a highly addictive personality. I do get that from my dad,
Yeah.
but he's also the reason like I've never like partaken in doing drugs because I know I would probably like it way too much. Um, so but I just stopped. I said I can't do this because I'm going to end up in a really bad place.
Hmm.
And he and I like we split, we went our own separate ways and I just worked on myself. I focused on work and I kept dealing with my adult sports that I was in and just focused. It's like I know I need to do better. I need to do better. I was still really young at that age. I was still really young. Like I
Yeah.
don't even
Early
think I
20s.
was yeah, I was. I think I was actually maybe like 20 years old at that time.
So that was the turning point for you where you started to realize like, okay, this isn't good for me. I need to focus on myself. But you were ill I would say, I would venture to say you were ill-equipped at that point to know that the work that needed to be done was inside. So you started doing the outside soothing behaviors instead of the inside healing behaviors. You developed coping skills, physical coping skills that were not unhealthy. You weren't drinking anymore, you weren't acting out with an unhealthy relationship. So now you're focusing on getting work in order, getting your future in order, getting your physical body together. But at what point do you think you realize like, okay, now there's something still missing inside that I might need to start addressing?
Um well, I mean, aside from the obvious over, like the last 6 months, there's constant stages of growth,
Right.
like within the last 6 to 8 months, that was the big one.
Yeah.
And some of those, honestly, I can say I didn't even know. I didn't even know that they were things until I started doing the work.
Right.
Some of them took place in my early 20s, but the real ones, honestly, have been within the last 6 to 8 months.
So when you say doing the work, because everybody says do the work,
Right.
I don't think that you didn't do the work sooner because you didn't want to. It's that it never occurred to you like what does that mean? And I think that
Right.
that's a problem with a lot of people today. Like they're everybody's learning. I talk about this in a lot of my content. Everybody's learning like the patterns and the things that they do and they get stuck there thinking, "Oh, now I've grown. Now I see it." But what how did you learn the work and how are you able to apply it in ways that are showing you tangible change in your relationships?
So for me, obviously, meeting you was one of the best things that ever could have happened to me. So obviously, like for you, because meeting you was one of the best things that ever could have happened to me. Being able to connect with you and listen to you and relate on it wasn't even relate on like personal exact life experience, but being able to relate to you just on different things on a different level. But yeah, like, hey, that hits home. I can relate to that. I get that. It may be a little bit different. It may be a little bit here or a little bit there or on a much higher level. But yeah, like that resonates with me.
Yeah.
And so I kept showing up and I kept coming back. And now we are literally like we're best friends
Yeah.
because we understand and we can elevate and communicate. And it it just makes sense. Like, I truly believe you were meant to be brought into my life for a purpose, and it's not just to make me rise up higher, but you are one of my truly best friends, and you know that females and I do not get along
Right.
together very
But
often
that's
because I
changed.
have a
That's changed
dominant dude.
too.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting better. I'm still working on that, but still working on it,
Baby steps.
which is good because, everybody always continues to improve
Right.
and get better. I mean, 6 months ago, I would have been yelling at every female to this word, that word, get out of my face, and
No.
just, but I at least allow people to have an opportunity
So
or,
that's the tool. I feel like you talk about this more often than anybody is the pause. I always talk about the pause. It's so annoying,
yeah,
right? But you've gotten to that place where you're like you feel that your nervous system goes, I want to go there, but then you stop yourself and you start questioning your own internal dialogue. Like, what, wait a second. This isn't about them. This is about me. So you've gotten to a place now, I think, where and we talked about this earlier on a side note, where you understand that you need to stop and ask yourself the questions like, is this, am I reacting or am I responding right now? And you have the conversation with yourself and you talk yourself off the ledge and you're able to act accordingly. However, currently in your current stage, it's still uncomfortable, right? But that's real time nervous system regulation. That's you actively doing the work in the moments where it's most uncomfortable on a recurring basis until it finally starts to become second nature for you to start eventually, if you keep doing what you've been doing without question, it's going to get to a point where it's not a fight anymore. It's not an internal battle anymore. It's just you're acting
it's
on
second
you.
nature. It becomes
Right.
second nature to you.
Right.
Hmm.
So I think where you're at right now, what's an important part, a key part of this for anybody that's listening right now, a key part is always going to be, we can't learn healthy behaviors without a healthy foundation. So until we have a structure, a solid structure of healthy people in our lives who allow us to respond with boundaries and in a way that we feel like we have a safe place to land, right? So it first starts with the foundation of healthy people, even if it's only one or two people that we know that we can respond in a healthy way without being consequenced or without feeling like there's a consequence. And if we do, we can communicate with those people and say like, hey, the way that you just responded made me feel like this, so maybe we can talk about that in a different way. You say what you need, right?
Yeah.
You don't, a lot of people have a tendency to step back and they're like, well, you should know that's it. That's a you phrase. You should
Yeah.
know. I've heard you say that numerous times. And
Yeah.
I think you've started to deconstruct that finally. That person should
Yeah.
know what I want. Why do I have to say it? And you're just slowly starting to apply that in your relationships. How's that been looking?
So, yeah, yeah, you called me out on that one. So for it is important to have your people, most definitely. And it doesn't have to be a whole entire room full or a stadium full of people. If you even have just a couple of people, like I agree with you, all you need is one or two people who understand you and they get you. And the best part about that is you don't want people who are constantly going to agree with you. You
No,
want
no, no, no.
people who, they're like those, you want people who are going to say, well, I'm going to challenge you on that. Or I respectfully disagree with you on that, but here's why. Because it's going to broaden your mind. It's going to make you think outside of your box that you're stuck in and go, huh, well, hey, I never thought about it like that.
Mhm.
And it's gonna broaden, expand your mind. It's gonna broaden your horizons and be like, I never would have even thought, like, hey, little Susie on the, grocery corner when I screamed at her this morning, she would have thought it was because she threw the orange at my head when really I was mad when I was walking out of the store and then she, threw the orange
Exactly.
at my head.
Exactly.
But there's dialogue. There's one thing, there's another thing. So there's perception. There's another thing that I learned also. So somebody, if I were to get up right now and just like, I don't know, walk in the other room, you could see it as I'm getting up because I'm angry and I'm walking away.
Perspective.
But you may not see I'm getting up because, whatever's going on, because you can't see it. We are all not mind readers, which is why the communication and comprehension of what is going on within communication is so extremely important. Right. So I constantly used to say, and it was huge for me. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It is still very, very important to me that people know, but also understand me and who I am. But it's not because of lack of opportunity. I'm not expecting, somebody just that I don't know to automatically know all these things about me. The the pause. The pause is massive. It will and it does become your second nature. I used to be, I still can, I still mess up from time to time and I still have my moments. The pause, the pause actually it just happened to me the other day. I was having a conversation with somebody and immediately my nervous system was just like, "Oh no, you did." And I wanted to just flip out, but it went off like that. And I was like, wait a minute.
Hmm.
Okay, let's do this. And then that's when it got flipped on me again. And this person was like, well, I really feel like I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like you're gaslighting me.
Hmm.
And that's when my nervous system was like, and I immediately I wanted to react. I said, "No,
Yeah.
this is when." Okay, so I asked the question. I remained calm. It was immediately just second nature. Are you doing that to me? Are you gaslighting me? But because I was able to pause, think, make the change, and make them see, I mean, they were floored. This person was just like,
But
"How?"
the other key point in that conversation is you did not react in an accusatory, like, no, you're doing
Correct.
this to me. It was inquisitive.
It was very
You were like,
inquisitive.
well, hold on. If we take a step back and look at this from the outside, both of us, and without emotion, what it really looks like is it could possibly be this. And there wasn't even a landing ground there. It was just a conversation where, and it was a pretty healthy, because you gave me the inside scoop. But it was a pretty healthy dialogue between the two of you. And at the end of the day, there was no lashing out on either side. It was a
Right,
comment that can be triggering to anybody, because that word is a
right.
trigger for anybody. And instead of reacting to it, you were able to go like, hold on, let's look at the facts here. Maybe this isn't how it appears on either side. Maybe this isn't how it appears. And you were able to have a conversation about it. Doesn't change the fact that it was a trigger and there's still like
Yeah,
some resonating stuff going on, but you're both able to communicate. And that's what the communication is all about. It's all about being able to recognize what's going on inside of us, and then when we have those healthy people in our lives, to be able, because you can't do this with just anybody, be able to communicate like, oh, I didn't like how that felt, can we talk through that, so that you guys are understanding each other. And then that's what healthy communication looks like. But we can't do that with just everybody. You have to have a healthy person to have those communications with, which is where that foundation
right.
of, you have to have a solid foundation of healthy people in your life in order to be able to accomplish these goals. And furthermore, going into that, which I talk about in some of my other content, it's important to know that process of weeding out the trash takes itself out. I love to say that process of allowing the trash to exit your life as you start to implement boundaries in your life, it can be very lonely. It can be very
Yes.
scary, and it requires a lot of self-reflection and a lot of intentional work. And for some people that looks like having just that one person that's supportive in your life. Maybe it could be through therapy, maybe it could be through support groups. There's a couple of different ways that could be accomplished, but it starts out feeling very like you feel abandoned. It's triggering abandonment because there's a lot of people that
Yeah.
thought loved you. There's a lot of people that you thought were in your corner, and as you start to implement a new boundaries in your life to protect yourself, because you realize that you're overgiving or you're overextending or you're
Yeah.
overworking in your relationships, people start to leave. And it's not because they don't love us, even though it feels that way. It's because the new us is not, it's not going to work for them. And that's how we learn who's healthy and who's not in our lives.
Yeah.
um but going into like your new reactions, right? This is all CBT foundation. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the core of how I operate as a therapist. There's a couple of different modalities that I use, but CBT is the majority of it. And you said perspective. You said, so I say all the time, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we perceive it. And the things the perception is what drives our reaction. So if we're able to take that step back and pause with compassion and look at like the person in traffic, this is a small example, that person in traffic that cuts me off, and my instinct is to say some things out loud, maybe even do some hand gestures, and then I have to stop myself. So I've gotten to a place now where, usually, not always, when someone cuts me off, I'm not like immediately wanting to honk my horn or whatever. I'm like, oh, I don't know what just happened to that person. I don't know if they're on their way to the hospital because somebody has an emergency. I don't know if someone in their life just passed away and they're not even thinking about what's going on around them. It's not my monkey, not my circus. Like, okay, if you need to get in front of
Right.
me, go ahead. So when I'm able to shift my perspective in that way, that's what CBT is. We're looking at what's the core of what's driving my reaction, so that I can reframe that narrative inside my brain, and then I can shift it and my reaction becomes totally different the next time. In the moment, I can't turn the emotion off, but I can reflect on it intentionally. That's why journaling is such a big thing for me. I can reflect on
Right.
it intentionally and be like, what triggered that for me today? And then look at like, ooh, is that really true? And try to reframe the narrative that comes up within us. And that resets the entire foundation for all of our relationships if we're able to start thinking about things in that way. One relationship where you've seen the biggest shift since you began this process, what would be that one?
Um, that's honestly, I would, that's kind of a tie. It's honestly kind of a tie. It would either be, it's the relationship that I have with myself now.
I love that.
I have, I have a lot more respect for myself, and I see myself much more clear on who I am as a person, what my self-worth is, that everything that I was told growing up, like I wasn't going to amount to anything, I wasn't worth anything, people's perceptions of me, just everything. I know that those were not true. Those are not accurate. And I know my self-worth. If anything, I think I hold myself up higher, a
Hmm.
lot higher. But also the relationship that I have with my mom, it is not, I still, I have a relationship with her, but I still keep her at arm's length, but I have set so many boundaries, and they're healthy boundaries. Um, if she, for example, if she starts going off on a tangent, if she just wants to spew whatever, I let her know I'm not engaging in this. You're talking about things that have nothing to do with me. I have no control over them. I'm here for you. I care about you. I'll set that boundary. If she continues, I said, okay, you're not respecting my boundaries right now. I'm going to hang up, and I'll hang up the phone. She'll get mad, but she needs to learn, hey, there's boundaries in place,
Right.
and I'm just not someone for you to, railroad over anymore.
Mm.
And this is what I will accept, and this is what I will not accept. You don't get to call me 100 times a day. You don't get to make me feel bad if I don't return your phone calls
Right.
and say, oh, you're not returning my calls. What's wrong? Why are you mad? There's this thing, and it's called life, and I have one. It's not because I'm angry with you, it's just because I'm busy.
Right.
Um, and I'm helping my sisters with these same things. They're older than I
10
am,
years
but I'm like,
older, yes.
yeah. And I'm like, this is acceptable. These things are okay. We shouldn't be made to feel guilty or to raise our parents. We had to raise ourselves, and she's going to be fine.
Right.
But boundaries are extremely important. And I want to be able to have that relationship with my mom. I'm glad that I have some form of one with her now. But again, like I said, it's still at arm's length, because I'm not going to allow her to have that full control like she once had.
Right.
It's just not in the cards. And that's okay. I'm fully accepting of it.
Not you restructuring the whole dynamic like that was the core wound, and you're
Yeah.
applying the work in ways. And listen, the most important thing I think for everybody to remember, and I think this has helped you a lot as well, you personally, is that this is messy. Like we're gonna fumble, and it's okay. Like
So
we're
messy.
human. And for me, the most important part is when I mess up, because I do all the time. Even as a therapist, I make mistakes too. I'm human too. I just have compassion. And instead of
Yeah.
beating myself up about it, I just go, okay, that was evidently the best you could do today. Maybe we do better tomorrow. And then I
Right.
look at what can I do differently the next time the same situation arises. Or I just give myself grace because maybe today just wasn't a good day. There are days,
Right.
even in my life, where I wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Doesn't happen often anymore, but there are still days where I wake up and I'm like, I'm not fit for public today. I'm just gonna, if I can, I'm gonna just disconnect from the whole world, crawl under the covers, and maybe do some journaling, probably do some binge watching. But it's okay to have a bad day, and we don't have
Yeah.
to project that onto other people. We can do that internally, or we can talk to one person that we trust. It doesn't have to be projected all over the place. There are not
Yeah.
always there's not always that option, but if there is, guys, one thing that wasn't planned to talk about today is sick days at work are a thing. And even though society doesn't accept a mental health day, you can take a mental health day. It's
Absolutely.
necessary sometimes. So that would be what I would have to say about that. I have a question. For the people watching, what is one thing that you would tell someone who's just beginning this process? Um, about taking the step? Like what is one thing you would advise other people who are like, no, this is way too much for me to do?
Like me, honestly, do it. It is going to be uncomfortable, but once the uncomfortable settles, and it does last a while, it does last a while, and you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, like I can't handle it, but you can. And once it starts to settle, that's when the self-awareness starts to come in, and then it gets better.
Mhm.
You start to climb out of the hole, and it becomes beautiful. Your self-awareness sets in, and everything just starts becoming,
Mhm.
and you get to see yourself,
Yeah.
your true self, and it's really an amazing thing. So I hope that you do it. I hope that you do it.
I know you have responsibilities at home.
I do.
I will cut you loose, and I appreciate you so much. So I
Yeah, we're good.
interrupt, guys, just for those of you that don't know, I interrupted Mal in the middle of, she's got stuff going on at the house. She's got some
I have adulting I have to do.
So, and this kind of started a little bit later than we expected. All right. All right. Mal's going to go. I have one final piece that I would like to say to everybody. Make sure that you pay attention to the pause. Like, it's okay to take a minute and ask yourself the questions, because a lot of times what we tell ourselves isn't exactly what's going on. A lot of times, if we take a step back and dissect what our brain is telling us, it's not what we think it is, and we can react accordingly. So I would ask you guys to think about this. Where in your relationships do you find yourself reacting from old patterns? And what would it look like to respond differently moving forward? I hope this was helpful. Everybody have a good day.